Welcome, everyone, to today's Chamber Chat. My name is Justin Furrow. I'm the chair of the Public Policy Committee at the Chamber, and we're delighted to have with us today Hamilton County Mayor candidate Weston Wamp. Weston, welcome.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate you having me.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know we were talking before we got on with your big family and your campaign. I know you're quite busy. So the way we structure these things is pretty informal. We like to have elected officials and those wishing to be elected officials come on and just talk to our business community, our membership about kind of your thoughts, ideas, and visions for what you would hope to do if you were allowed to become county mayor. And so what I'd like to do first is to allow those who don't know you as well as I do to learn a little bit about your backgrounds. Why don't you tell our members a little bit about you, who you are, and your background?
Yeah. Weston Wamp, lifetime Chattanoogan, grew up on Big Ridge and Hickson, went to Big Ridge Elementary School, one of our great public elementary schools here in this county. I've lived in Lookout Valley for most of the last 20 years of my life. In my early 20s, had the great fortune and unusual experience of basically becoming the little brother in business to really the great entrepreneurs of their generation in our community, Ted Alling, very large, and Alan Davis, and kind of fast-tracked my understanding of the business world. And it was kind of a baptism by fire all at the same time. Justin, I know you know those guys, and was there at the very earliest days of Lamppost, which was, I think, hard to understand and appreciate back then, but one of the boldest private sector investment programs that the community has ever seen. And certainly several of the fastest growing companies in the community today came out of some of the work we were doing. Jack Studer and I were the very first two people. I mean, I was such a Lamppost OG that I spent the first 3 or 4 months of my career here in Chattanooga on Rossville Boulevard working out of the Access America office. I was actually an Access America employee before joining Lamppost. Began on the marketing side, doing PR and marketing for several of the companies for Lamppost proper. Transitioned more onto the investment side. Spent a lot of time on the road for about a year promoting Chattanooga's entrepreneurial scene, thinking about what the strengths and weaknesses, frankly, of our community were as it related to the early stage kind of growth sector in the tech world, and decided that our entity would be best served and most sustainable if we transitioned it into a formal fund focused on transportation logistics. That's how Dynamo came to be. Was a part of that. I think at the time it was arguably the biggest proper venture capital fund that the community had ever seen, and it's gone on to big success. Is now on Fund 2. After our second child was born, Shelby may have been pregnant with our third, I wanted to get back and do some policy work. Started the Millennial Debt Foundation, which is really the only generational organization in America talking about fiscal policy, both at the state and federal level, specifically talking about the federal government's debt and deficit problem. For 20 years. Really stewardship has just completely gone to the wayside. And I'd say it's a combination of that experience and then being appointed to the Tennessee Board of Regents, the largest college system in Tennessee that governs all of our 2-year colleges. Governor Lee made me his second appointee 2.5 years ago. The combination of seeing up close and personal Washington's total dysfunction, seeing up close and personal that maybe the most proud, productive public institutions in our state are our technical colleges. They run with just incredible proficiency. That dichotomy really caused me to believe the future of the country is not in Washington. It is in great communities and great states that are thoughtfully developing their workforce, that, in my personal opinion, are sticking to the conservative roots here. And that's a lot of what led me, upon Mayor Coppinger's decision not to run again, to decide to run. And I'd add to that just being a dad of 4 and a person who's learned from several different vantage points in the business community that public education here has been stuck in mediocrity for generations. Well, for a generation, for decades. And I think we pay an enormous price, Justin, that we don't fully understand. The chamber does probably better than anybody because the chamber officials are the ones who often see how close we come to recruiting some high-paying jobs here that we can't, either because of our workforce or because of the quality of public education. They're really one and the same. So that's what drove me to run for the position, which is, at the end of the day, under Tennessee state law, primarily a financial position. Authors, what will soon be $1 billion a year budget. 64% of it's public education. So you can't really overstate how big public education is within the scope of county government.
So as a lifelong Chattanoogan myself, I appreciate those who are willing to give back to what I think is the greatest community around. Hearing you talk, I know you talk a lot about your family, about your entrepreneurial background and your service to the state. Honing in on kind of what you've done, how do you think that prepares you to be the next county mayor and be in charge of that $1 billion?
Yeah. Well, I think what I've done in business, I mentioned this briefly, the nature of the work that we did at Lamppost, whether it was being a part of companies on the ground floor, many of which grew too fast to grow exclusively in Chattanooga. You see the strengths and weaknesses. We also were recruiting companies here. A lot of times we were, people we were bringing in town as their first trip ever to Chattanooga. And you just see our strengths and weaknesses illuminated doing the work we were doing, not to mention having spent a lot of time on the road promoting Southeast Tennessee. And so I think that there's a direct connection between economic development there. I'm the only candidate running with any formal experience in education. And, a two-year college system is extremely diverse just by the nature of what it does. I mean, it is a feeder to our four-year college system. It is a primary workforce development college system. So we train welders and nurses and just about everything in between. We're an open access system. And so unlike the University of Tennessee, which you apply to and then may or may not be accepted, it's not how it works in a community college or a technical college environment. And because of that, our system really confronts on a daily basis what's broken in K-12. I tell people often, it's like we get to take a look under the hood of what's broken. And some of it's pretty tragic. I talk often about how I think the one-size-fits-all model in public education has failed our students to the point that if you really want to drill down and understand why we have such drug addiction issues, such violent crime issues, rampant hopelessness in a lot of our poorest communities, a lot more than we may realize ties back to education. And then I'd say in a unique way, I have across different parts of my career been a fiduciary. And what I mean there is actually a manager of other people's money, which is distinctly different than managing your own money. I did that in the private sector, managing a fund, done it in the nonprofit sector, running a 501c3 nonprofit. The Board of Regents runs a $1.45 billion budget. I'm on the finance committee. That's about 50%. It's more than 50% bigger than the county budget. And so I think understanding and having felt the pressure across industries to be a good steward of money that's not your own has prepared me well to take over from Eric Coppinger and write a budget, be a steward, and frankly, go be an advocate for taxpayer dollars being used efficiently.
So you talked a little bit there about economic development and kind of your role in the private sector in economic development. You well know that the Chamber is keenly focused on economic development and is a partner with the county. As we look to the future of economic development, you think about McDonald Farm and the opportunities that we have in the county. What are your ideas on how we grow jobs that create that opportunity for all Hamilton County residents to secure, a living wage employment?
Yeah. Well, when politicians talk about economic development, it's often kind of political buzzword talk. I mean, it's different if you're talking to Charles Wood at the Chamber, who executes in that arena on a daily basis. The politicians love to take credit for stuff. The truth is, economic development often comes down to, do you have a community where businesses want to invest, right? Where the sort of free market forces that are at play make your community an attractive place. And I'd argue, kind of going back to a couple of things we've already talked about here, we've known for some time what our deficiencies are. We've got deficiencies in our blue collar workforce. Volkswagen's told us that. They've been very public about that since they made a gigantic investment here. What I don't think maybe we're transparent enough about is how hard it's been to recruit so-called white collar jobs to downtown Chattanooga. And the reason there is you come and you meet this dazzling mid-sized city, And, we're all used to the culture where if you live in proximity to the city of Chattanooga, there's a very high likelihood that your children go at a certain point to a private school. That is not common in many parts of the country. It's even not common in parts of the state of Tennessee, and we'll lose job recruitment efforts to Knoxville and Williamson County, south of Nashville, on a regular basis due to that. So I don't think you can overstate how much economic development, particularly in the hub of commercial activity in our county, in the city of Chattanooga, how much it will change if the perception and the reality, both the perception and the reality of public education improve. And so, one of the, real bold ideas that I've been talking about for a decade that we've put into our platform is this idea that the county and the city, and I think you could even convince the state to enter a partnership that would allow us to build a world-class middle school and high school downtown. It would completely change if you've ever been on a Chamber of Commerce job recruitment tour, we got a company coming into town of whatever size. If they're interested in investment in the city of Chattanooga, that conversation often goes to public education. The conversation around high schools, especially in proximity to the city of Chattanooga, becomes pretty embarrassing for those of us who've been a part of those type efforts, because just from an average ACT score perspective, other than our magnet schools, which are near impossible to get in, the performance of some of our middle schools and most of our high schools in the city limits is pretty dreadful. Talking more broadly about economic development, the world's our oyster on McDonald Farm. I personally have preached a real patient approach to what we do up there. It's rare and pretty cool that a community like ours was able to secure a couple thousand acres, the largest remaining contiguous tract of land in the county. I don't think we should rush to develop it, by the standards of the last 20 years. I think we should be patient and real methodical about how we develop it for the next 50 years. And I tell people, particularly when I'm up in Sale Creek, that may very well mean, as a guy who's introducing support for term limits in county government for the first time in my lifetime, nobody's ever really talked about term limits in county government. I think all executive positions should be limited to no more than 8 years. And so that's what we're going to do. We're also going to go advocate for those term limits to be implemented across non-judicial positions in county government, like Knox County and Metro Nashville and Shelby County have. And so within the realities of 8 years, I'm not sure that you'll see the big generational industrial or even, it could be some workforce housing. Who knows what the future of McDonald Farm is? We certainly should begin to lay the groundwork from an infrastructure perspective. I don't know that the north corridor of the county ought to be developed imminently. They certainly don't want it to be, right? I mean, if you're familiar with the kind of north part of this county, the life is different. It moves at a different pace, and I think we ought to respect that and be real thoughtful about that tract of land. And then I think the county mayor is going to play a determinative role in what happens on the 300 acres contiguous to downtown, Wheeling site, Austin site. Add that all up together, you got about 300 acres, which is one of a kind. There's no tract of land like that in the country adjacent to a mid-sized city, let alone, also on the banks of a river. And I look forward to, being the guy representing our county across the table from employers who I think could change the quality of life in our community if they'd choose to invest there. But the biggest thing that would change the game of us being able to recruit transformative employers to that land is actually education, more than some of the things that are talked about.
So as a lifelong, or somebody who was born and raised in Soddy Daisy, I can attest to the fact that life does move a little slower up there. So on education, I mean, anybody that's seen you speak in your campaign or seen your ads know that education's a focus. I mean, we've touched on it a number of times already in the last 15 minutes and kind of some of the issues that we're facing in the education realm. Considering that there's a county school board, right? If you win county mayor, you can't just walk in and change everything. How would you use your role as county mayor to ensure that Hamilton County children from birth all the way to career receive quality education opportunities?
Yeah, I think we've hoped on hope for my lifetime that a superintendent solely can lead all the changes that we'd all like to see in public education. I just don't think that's realistic in our form of government. The hard things, the unpopular things, the daring, bold, generational ideas often have to be proposed and enacted by elected officials. They're the ones who have a mandate from the public, not from a board, but from the public. And that's one of the reasons I think a county mayor has an important role to play in public education. The role is not to go and rewrite first grade curriculum. I'm not qualified to do that. I am qualified to speak to the disconnect between our public school system and the workforce. And it is a shockingly big divide. Even to understand how much our county fails in opening up dual enrollment opportunities, true vocational opportunities. We are in a totally different category than many, even rural counties in East Tennessee, in terms of the options that we put before our students to go and pursue the skilled trades while they're in school. And that's a shame. I really do believe it's part of understanding why our inner city communities are hurting like they are, why there's so many hopeless students. And so what I'd like to lead is a refocusing of the public school system on preparing young people for adulthood. Right now, public school, and it's no different here than it is across America, it's basically focused on sending kids to college. Everybody's not meant to go to college. It's not that some kids aren't smart enough. Some kids who are smart enough to go to college, Justin, still shouldn't go to college because it's just not where their giftedness and passion is. And so we've got to aggressively push back against that stigma. Rarely you're going to find a school superintendent who has the level of passion I do about going a true vocational route or going a technical college route. And that's where, again, I think the county mayor plays a broader role. In this community, it's important for people to understand that part of the county mayor's role in education also comes through the reality that we only have one taxing authority. Some school boards across the state and the country have their own taxing authority. Our school system is funded by county general government. County general government is led by the county mayor. County mayor signs on behalf of taxpayers, and I think has a very important role as a steward of those tax dollars, whether it's going into roads, the health department, or the school system. And certainly we expect the county mayor to play a role in economic development, workforce development, but you can't understand our challenges and opportunities there without understanding our challenges in public education.
So shifting gears a little bit from education, hard infrastructure improvement is something that's sorely needed in Hamilton County as we continue to grow and attempt to attract more businesses and more people and population expands. In what ways do you think the county can move forward on things like roads and wastewater, energy capacity, and broadband access, things like that hard infrastructure that we know is such an issue in our county?
The next county mayor, whether they're prepared for it or not, is going to lead the county through a transition where the vast majority of new development is in unincorporated parts of the county. That trend has already begun, but I think we're just now realizing, wow, the growth areas don't have a municipal form of government. And so it really calls on county government as the only form of government to set a vision. And we've got to have a more comprehensive vision for smart growth, particularly out east and up north. And up north really begins in Middle Valley, in that unincorporated area. I would introduce into this conversation one of the most serious infrastructure issues we have. I think of it as an infrastructure issue, is in fire protection. These big growing parts of the county, they're not covered by a municipal fire department. They're covered by volunteers. And only volunteers. And I don't think many people, particularly in the city of Chattanooga, where a lot of these conversations are kind of traded, I don't know that we really understand, we are, because you just don't have generationally as much interest or the spirit of volunteerism. For example, in Sale Creek, they have a hard time getting young guys to show up to the volunteer fire hall. We're talking about industrial development that'll lead to great residential development. We could just be a few years away from not having a functional fire service up in the north part of the county. So we got to comprehensively. Are you losing me, Justin? I just got to notice that
just got you back when you started with comprehensively. So I think it was about 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we've failed, I think, to plan comprehensively. The politicians particularly kind of county politicians have kicked the can down the road. And first among those who've kicked the can down the road is my opponent, Sabrina Smedley. Sabrina is a nice woman, but I think she wants to kind of have her cake and eat it too in this race. And so she often talks about how the politicians have not made the tough decisions on infrastructure. And she's the person who nuked the wastewater project that Mayor Coppinger had spent many years preparing, that would have been a generational solution on wastewater. Wastewater, Justin, because the feds have sent so much money across the country due to the pandemic of all things, it's probably going to be resolved for a period of time here. So that one's not as big an issue. But I think the community is going to have to be honest. When you talk about these hard infrastructure issues, you get what you pay for. There is no cheat in the system unless one of us running for county mayor has some insights into how you mix asphalt differently. Roads just cost money. Sewers cost money. That's why it's one of the reasons why I think without talking about new revenue, without talking about tax increases, we could transform a public education system that is, frankly, I just don't even think focused on the right things in many of our schools. There's $500 million there that we could refocus and re-engineer towards preparing young people to work. But when you talk about this infrastructure stuff, there's no easy issue, no easy answers.
So, shifting a little bit, and I realize I'm jumping around some, but you seemed adept at keeping up. Let's talk about DE&I, right? I mean, that's a big focus of the chamber. As county mayor, what do you think could be done to advance supplier diversity and procurement in a way that could bolster economic inclusion across the county?
Well, you're not going to be surprised, and I'm going to take this answer back to education. The biggest singular shame in public education, and for that matter, I could argue in local government in this community, is that within my lifetime, we closed Kirkman, which was at times a predominantly African-American vocational school. You got a generation of minority tradespeople, many of whom became entrepreneurs because they started their life with a set of skills. These D&I issues, frankly, take care of themselves if our young people are equipped by our school system with a set of skills that are going to serve them well. The most realistic path to starting a small business isn't what a lot of people think it is. It's not that you have some brilliant idea, that nobody else, in human history has ever had. It's that you got a set of skills and you go and start a small business. And that's the story of entrepreneurship in every corner of this town. And I think it's one of the most heartbreaking things when you realize how difficult it is, for example, at Brainerd High School. Spent a couple hours at Brainerd about 10 days ago. And if you want to beat the odds at Brainerd High School and you want to be the first person in your family to come out at 18, 19 years old and have a set of skills that'll put you in the workforce, you can't hardly do it. There's no dual enrollment options at the technical college there. We've shut down the only mostly black, decades ago, only mostly black or minority vocational school. And, we've taken the first step back in the right direction with the construction of the new construction trade center. That's a partnership with the AGC, the Board of Regents, county government. Several players came together. But we've got to do that several more times. I mean, that's it's not, when we think about skilled labor, that's awesome. That's where you can really go make a fortune, whether you're self-employed or not. But I talk about vocational education, which is a term, ironically, you're not even supposed to use anymore. I talk about it more broadly. And I helped get off the ground a logistics program that Chattanooga State's building out for this fall. It's got a component that's going to tie into high schools at US Express. My thought there is this is going to be an avenue for young people to go and get trained up without the need to go tens of thousands of dollars into student loan debt, get trained up to enter the logistics industry, the highest growth, and also our legacy industry here. How many people do you and I know who've started out working in a 3PL, a freight brokerage, and gone off and started their own company? Well, it's another example of how, if we really want diversity in vendors, well, then we need diversity in entrepreneurship to begin with. And I think we've, without realizing it, we've gotten away from setting our young people up for the most likely path to entrepreneurship, which is having a set of skills.
Well, Weston, I appreciate your time here today. And I know you're busy and I want to be respectful of the time. We could talk all day about these topics. Yeah. You're passionate about them and engaging, but what I'd like to do now is just offer you the opportunity to talk to our members, whatever you want to talk about. just kind of wrap up. And in doing so, be sure to direct them if they want to find more information out about Weston Wamp and your campaign, your platform. Where could they do that?
Yeah, westonwamp.com. And then it's easy, in the age of social media, I didn't have much competition for the handle Weston Wamp on any platform. There's no other person with that name. So I'm easy to find. And I tell your membership this, Justin. I mean, county government, I think in a lot of ways is misunderstood by the business community because we've known who the county mayor is, but not a lot about the job. We've been really fortunate for 12 years that Jim Coppinger has been a low drama, effective, consistent county mayor. But the stakes are incredibly high. The job is only going to become more important. The job really should be seen, whether people realize it or not, moving forward as an education position. And, because we don't have term limits, I tell people, listen, if you end up with the wrong county mayor, you may be stuck with them for 20 years. And we've been fortunate that that's not been the case. This county's only had 3 county mayors since 1978, 3 total. And I reckon, just to be frank, that both of my opponents will retire into the job. And some people are comfortable with that. I think there's a better way. And so if we win, all my friends and closest supporters know this, the culture of county government will forever be different. It'll be more transparent. It'll be more accountable. People are going to be on an 8-year clock or a 4-year clock. I mean, that's, truth is, what we're signing up for here, Shelby and I, is we're going to give this thing hell for 4 years. And if people think we do a good job, we'll do one more term and that's it. But I think, you think about the liveliness of city government, the accountability that comes with competitive elections every 4 years. We ought to have that in county government. It would really change, I think, the business community's engagement in county government if there was that kind of accountability and transparency. And it's a big part of the case we're going to make down the stretch here.
Weston, on behalf of the Chamber and particularly our Public Policy Committee, I appreciate you being with us today, taking the time to answer a few questions, and best of luck in your county mayor race. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, man.